Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, the Honourable Sir James Mansham, distinguished members of Parliament, representatives of the diplomatic community, good friends and fellow participants from the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy. My name is Mark Donfried, Director and Founder of the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy. And before I continue, is the sound okay? Can everyone hear okay? Excellent. I'll try to speak up. If there's a way of raising the volume, perhaps we could try that as well. And no, for me, as the director of the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy, this is a very important opportunity for us this week to really look not only at a topic that we see of vital importance, but at a region where we see a great potential for more work in the field of cultural diplomacy, and at a time in the history of the global community when I think it's very interesting for us to really ask these kinds of questions. What can cultural diplomacy do to strengthen relations? What challenges are currently look at the topic of the conference, there's really maybe three levels of reflection that we'd like to look at and to emphasize for the conference. The main title, of course, International Symposium on Cultural Diplomacy in the Commonwealth. Many of you who know the field of cultural diplomacy are familiar with examples, I'm sure, of the British Council or the Goethe Institute or Alliance Française. In the 20th century, primarily cultural diplomacy, as the Institute would put it, we frame it as classical cultural diplomacy, traditionally done by governments in the framework of soft power, to quote Professor Joseph Nye at Harvard University. Really this idea, how do we win the hearts and minds of foreign audiences? How do we persuade? How do we attract? And I think in the 20th century that worked relatively well, you could say, with the success of the Cold War being the big, let's say, cultural diplomacy experiment between the Soviets and the Americans. However, today, we at the Institute see really a new challenge and a new responsibility for cultural diplomacy. For us, it's not enough just to persuade or just to attract. What we really believe is necessary for the global community is not persuasion, but actually trust. How do we build understanding and how do we build trust? Between nations, between peoples, between cultures. That's the most important element for us. We don't have to agree. We don't have to also have the same opinion. We don't even have to like each other. We do need to trust each other if we want to do business together, if we want to develop peaceful relations, if we want to make contributions to the global challenges facing us, whether it's climate change, mass atrocities, poverty, who knows. These are vital components. So that's one transition we've seen in this field of cultural diplomacy. Really, the cultural diplomacy of today and tomorrow, for us at the Institute, is a cultural diplomacy where really we ask the question, how do we educate, how do we enhance, how do we sustain relations with the ultimate goal of building trust? The second aspect of the title, of course, Commonwealth. What we're looking at these next few days is not only unilateral cultural diplomacy, as has been commonly practiced between one country and another country, but here really the opportunity for multilateral cultural diplomacy. What has been done, what can be done within the Commonwealth? Are there success stories? Are there failures? What can be done in the future between the Commonwealth and the rest of the world? So there, I think that's another interesting component of this event, really, where we try to examine this unilateral phenomena or bilateral phenomena, cultural diplomacy, as it's getting transposed multilaterally. The second part of the title, of course, is very important as well. Given the timing of this event, we're looking at the issue, the 70th anniversary of the establishment of the UN, developing initiatives to promote cultural understanding, global human rights, and world peace within the Commonwealth. I think this is a very important year. As you know, in a few months will be the big General Assembly meeting of the UN in New York, where it's really a time, on the one hand, of reflection, looking back. There's many in the global community who are very frustrated with the United Nations and say, this is really a handicapped organization that's not doing anything. You know, it's paralyzed, whether it's Syria, whether it's ISIS, etc. There's many, such as myself, who are really grateful for how far we have come and really the great contributions that we have seen from such a challenging constellation of nations coming together. I don't see an alternative to the UN. Yes, it may not be what we'd like, but I think obviously so far we have accomplished quite a bit, and we see the potential as being even greater. So that's really in a positive, constructive way. We want to look at this example of the UN 70 years later to see how far have we come, where do we need to go, and perhaps cultural diplomacy could play a role. Maybe it's not only hard power, maybe it's not only economics and military that can lead the way. Perhaps culture, or this cultural component, has a role to play as well. So for me, I'm really excited to join with you in this week's conference. I'm also very grateful to have had an excellent group of partners, primarily the Universal Peace Federation, who's kindly agreed to co-host this conference with us today and the final day here in their premises, tomorrow in the House of Lords. It's a great collaboration we've had throughout the years. I'm happy that we can continue it. And I think you'll really see a benefit from the expertise of both organizations coming together. In addition to that, of course, I'm grateful to a good friend and partner, Sheikh Ramzi, who's here as the director of the Oxford Center for Information. And actually, I always mispronounce it. The Oxford Islamic Information Center International, which he will tell us more about. But there, that's really this issue of interfaith dialogue, where we've done so much work throughout the years. We'll continue with today's panel discussion. Religion traditionally has been something absent from cultural diplomacy. Religion was thought of as something taboo, something that causes problems. We really believe, all of the organizers, that the opposite is possible, that actually interfaith dialogue can actually increase and improve relations. The more we discuss these differences, the better it is, than the less we discuss it. And so that's another common interest of Sheikh Ramzi as well as Robin Marsh and myself. So we very much look forward to today. Just so you know, a minor revision in the start of this event. First, right after I conclude, which is right now, I'll invite Robin Marsh, Secretary General of the Universal Peace Federation, to give us a few words of welcome on his behalf. And then immediately I will give an introduction to our guest of honor for the day and also for this conference, Sir James Mansham. Many of you know who Sir James Mansham is, founding president of the Seychelles, but really someone throughout his life who has done so much for cultural diplomacy, and really up until today, nonstop. It's still difficult for me, Sir James, to keep up with your travel schedule, getting peace prizes here and there, and really nonstop. I think your dedication to peace continues in such an impressive way. That's why I think really, as the keynote speaker for today, and also the honorary chairman for this event, we are very grateful to Sir James having come the great distance from the Seychelles to be here. So I will say a few words of introduction for him at around, let's say, 2 or 3 minutes from now. He has his keynote address. And then the new addition to the program, we're going to have a panel discussion looking at cultural diplomacy, religious offense, and freedom of speech, to again try to grapple with this issue, religion. Is this only a problem dividing force, or is there some positive potential? And is this also part of the job of cultural diplomacy to deal with this as opposed to avoiding it? And thereafter, we will continue more or less as planned in the printed schedule which you have there with the speakers for today. So I very much look forward to beginning this 3-day conference with all of you. And I'd like you to give me your assistance in giving a very warm welcome to our co-host for the events, Mr. Robin Marsh, Secretary General of the Universal Peace Federation. Please, Mr. Robin Marsh. Thank you.